It's time for another round of that game show that no one has been asking for. Well, maybe at some point now some of you are, but normally no one is asking for. It's Christmas trivia that you maybe never knew. This is our third round of trivia this week and throughout this Advent season, and we've got a new set of questions for you today, so we're going to jump right into them. And that is the first one. The first one is this. What is Boxing Day? Some of you may not even have ever heard that, but it is a tradition that is out there. So the question is, what is Boxing Day? And your options are Mike Tyson's birthday, the day U-Haul was founded, a dog's Christmas, like a boxer dog, or is it the day after Christmas? Let me know what you think. Now, if you guess the day after Christmas, you would be right. It is the day after Christmas. Now, normally, I would tell you a little bit more about this, except that we've got another question related to Boxing Day, and we'll kind of go into it after that one. So our second question related to Boxing Day in this round of Christmas trivia is this. When was Boxing Day first celebrated? When was Boxing Day first celebrated? Was it during Victorian England, in ancient times, in Puritan New England, or during the French Revolution? Think about it for a second, come up with the answer, and let's see how well you do. If you said in ancient times, you would be correct. Well, mostly correct, because it wasn't really called Boxing Day back in ancient times, but that's when we can kind of trace some of this start back to it. Did you know that the celebration, what we would now call the end of December over the New Year, has been around for a very, very long time. There have been celebrations, there have been feasts, there have been gift giving, even that's been going on for a very, very long time. During Roman times, there was the Roman god Saturn, and there was a festival called Saturnalia, which took place at about this same time of year. Right around, the dates all get confused at a certain point, but right around this time of year. And one of the traditions that they had then was that there was gift giving, there were feasts, there were parties, there were celebrations. Sometimes one of the traditions that you don't see too much anymore was that during this festival they would often crown a festival king, so to speak. It would be someone that would be from the common people, not one of the nobility, and they would make all sorts of proclamations, and there'd be celebrations and such related to that during this festival. Now that would get continued in many ways when we would jump forward to feudal times and other times when there would be masters and servants, and Boxing Day was often an opportunity for those folks to switch places, for the masters to become the servants and the servants to become the masters, and so we kind of see that switch in there. But the name Boxing Day builds on a lot of these festivals and traditions that used to take place that have been handed down in various forms and traditions over the many, many years until we get to something that more resembles a time we're familiar with. And Boxing Day was when masters and other wealthy folks that would have lots of servants, because those servants would have to work on Christmas Day to take care of their household or their servant or their masters or whoever all those folks were that they worked for. The day after became a holiday, and is still, in fact, recognized as a holiday in many parts of the world. And that would be those lords and ladies and masters would give boxes, oftentimes of food, maybe of gifts and stuff, to their servants that would take them then back to their families for celebrations, for other festivities that they would have then back in their own place. That's where that box would begin to come from. Also, where it kind of gets a little bit murky about which came first here, but also there would be charity boxes in churches. And those charity boxes, this would be a time when folks would give generously into those boxes, and then the donations that had been made into those boxes then would be distributed out to folks who were in need. Now we can see that there's many traditions that have passed over the many years. One of those is helping out others who are in need. Gift giving has been long before Christmas became a really big celebration. Gift giving has been a part of that. And we can see that in these many traditions. But talking about gift giving, there's one other question that I have for us today. And that is because we talk about gift giving, and often our nostalgia at Christmas kicks in and says, well, gift giving, we want to be like old fashioned and everything needs to be a certain way because things were better back then before we got over commercialized with how things are today. And so we talk about gifts and they should be of a certain kind almost so they have meaning. And so my last question for us today is this, is to give an example of an old fashioned gift. Now I've got 4 choices for you here for you to figure out which one of these is an example of an old-fashioned gift. Is it food, a Christmas card, a homemade toy, or something that is store-bought? Take a moment to come up with your answer, and let's see, and then we'll see how you do. Now, if you're maybe sensing a theme from what I did last week to this week, I'm not going to do it again next week. But the answer this week is all of them. All 4 of them are examples of old-fashioned gifts. Now, I know you're looking at it thinking, well, you've got store-bought on there. Well, here's kind of what happened. The oldest kind of gift that would be given at Christmas or around this time of year, even before Christmas was a holiday that we celebrated, is food. Food has always been a great gift, has always been an old gift that just the thing that has changed the kinds of foods that we give out at this time of year. But otherwise, it has always been kind of a staple of this time of year. Christmas cards, oh no, I'll come back to this in a second. Homemade toys or other homemade gifts have long been a part of this. Now, it's not because a lot of times they were special and they had more meaning. A lot of times it was because that was all folks could give, something that they had that was homemade. Homemade food or homemade toys, those were what folks had to give. Now, they would oftentimes mean a lot more because they were homemade, but that was generally just what folks had ready access to. Now we look at Christmas cards. They have been around since the early to mid 1800s. Now, there were some different traditions of giving cards, but Christmas cards specifically came into popularity because they were mass-produced. And once they started being mass-produced, folks started giving them and sharing them with folks, and they became kind of this huge, enormous industry that we find today. But that also leads me to saying that store-bought goods were also an important gift that would be given to folks, because here's one of the things that happened, whether we're talking about homemade gifts or store-bought gifts, we have this nostalgia that says it should mean something important. Well, what means something important has changed with every generation, because back in the day, store-bought, it could have a lot of meaning. Why? Because everyone had all the homemade stuff. And oftentimes, even the homemade stuff would be silly. It might be frivolous. It might be a trinket. Stuff we would say today, you're wasting your money on. Folks would spend money on it. It was kind of expected. Why? Well, because in those times, you didn't do frivolous. You didn't do trinkets. You didn't do stuff that had no purpose throughout the rest of the year, because life was hard. It was a little bit more difficult. You might not have as much money to do anything with, and so you were always very careful in what you were doing and what you were using. But Christmas was an opportunity to do something outside of the norm. So store-bought was a great option because you might not buy too much from a store ever before that. Frivolous and trinkets were important gifts because they didn't have a purpose. But for folks that everything had to have a purpose, that was something special. What I want us to think of as we go through the rest of this week and through this Christmas season is not to get caught up in what many folks would say, oh, you need to focus on this. What we have to remember is that a lot of times there's a lot of nostalgia that is being brought in, but a lot of it we don't really know where it comes from, and we have lost what has actually happened then. What's most important is to ask yourself why. Not what, but why. Why are we giving? Why are we giving to some people? Why are we giving these kinds of gifts? What meaning do we hope to impart? What are we trying to share with others? What kind of gift at that point doesn't make a whole lot of difference so long as it fits with what you're doing, whether it's homemade, whether it's store-bought, whether it is food, whatever it is. Even if it is just putting a crisp dollar bill into an envelope and you're sending it to a grandkid or a niece or a nephew or someone else, what's important is not what. What's important is not the nostalgia that we carry forward. What's important is the why. And the why for us as Christian people is really key, because that's why we do the things that we do, for the great gift that was given to us. That wasn't at all what was expected. That wasn't at all what everyone thought would come when the new king, when the Messiah would arrive. But instead was a tiny baby who was laid to rest in the manger of a stable because there was no other place for him to go. And yet, we knew God's why, because God loves us and wants us to have hope that we can never have before. How that took place, that is not at all what anyone was expecting, but it was why God sent him in the first place, gave him to us in the first place. That's the key. I want us to remember that as we go into the rest of this holiday season. I hope you have a great week. And if I don't see you back here online at some point this week, we'll see you next Sunday. We'll see you back here, back online. We've got one more installment of Christmas trivia left, so just wait to see what comes next.